everyone, and welcome to this unit's virtual classroom where you will be introduced to how to perform quantitative analysis focusing on formulas and functions in Excel 2010. The objectives for this unit is mathematics and formula, using semi-selection to create a formula, learning the difference between relative and absolute cell referencing, inserting a function, inserting basic statistical functions, and using date functions. Let's begin by opening up our Microsoft Excel 2010 program and starting off with a worksheet that we must complete. In this example, you have been hired at Sunrise Credit Union in the Toronto branch, and it is your responsibility to complete the payroll. As you can see, most of the formatting has already been completed and some of the data has already been entered. What your responsibility will be is to calculate the formulas in order for this worksheet to be completed. Formulas in Excel transform otherwise static numbers into meaningful results that can update as values change. For example, a payroll manager can build formulas to calculate the gross pay, deductions, and net pay for an organization's employees. You can use formulas to help you analyze how results will change as the input data changes. Simply change an input value and observe the change in the formula results as long as the formula has been built correctly. Before starting to enter in our formulas, we must understand that Excel does use the four basic mathematical operations, which are addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. Every formula that you enter into an Excel spreadsheet must precede by an equal sign. And the other part of the formulas in Excel is to use cell addresses instead of the values as references in a formula where possible. Referencing these cells in your formula instead of typing the value of the cell to which you're referring keeps your formulas accurate if the values change. If you change the value of a certain cell that you have referenced in your formula, the formula will automatically update. However, if you had typed the actual value in the formula, you would have to edit the formula each time a value changed. Always design worksheets in such a way as to be able to change input values without having to modify your formulas if an input value changes later. Recall the basic rules of performing calculations from a high school or college math class. Many of us know this as order of operations, and we use the acronym called BISM. B for brackets, E for exponents, D for division, M for multiplication, A for addition, and S for subtraction. This is the basic rule that controls the sequence in which arithmetic operations are performed, which affects the results of the calculation. Let's begin by inserting our first formula, regular pay. If you refer to the notes below, it says number 1, the base work week is 40 hours. Regular pay is based on hourly wage and hours worked up to 40 hours. Since all of our employees on this worksheet have either worked 40 or more hours, we can insert a formula of equals 40 times the hourly wage. And when we're inserting a formula, we always work with the line that we're working on, and we hit enter. And it gives us the total of $398. You will notice that the result of 398 appear in the cell where the formula appears up in the formula bar. Now that we have a formula inserted in the first cell, we need to be able to repeat that formula all the way down for the rest of our employees. Excel has a feature called Autofill, which enables you to copy the contents of a cell or a range of cells by dragging the fill handle. The fill handle is the small black square that appears at the bottom right hand corner of the active cell. When you position your mouse over the bottom right corner, it turns into a thick black plus sign. By clicking and dragging down, it automatically fills our formula for us. Now you're probably wondering, how does it fill the formula? Well, let's take a look and analyze it. If we make E5 an active cell and we look up in the formula bar, you'll notice that it says equal 40 times C5, which is exactly what we inserted when we inserted the formula. By using the fill handle, if we make E6 the active cell, you'll notice that the formula automatically says equal 40 times C6. If I go to E7, equal 40 times C7. So you'll notice that the cells are changing as we continue down our employee list. The cells that are changing throughout the formula are called relative cells. Regardless of where you copy the formula, the cell references in the copied formula maintain the same relative distance from the copied formula cell. So wherever you put the formula, the cells will always change and will always update accordingly. However, there's going to be a time where you're going to want to create a formula where each of your cells in your worksheet direct only to one cell at all times. So in the next formula, which is called the overtime pay, we need to figure out how many overtime hours that they have worked and what the pay will be. If you'll notice that in B21, there is an overtime rate of 1.5, which we say time and a half. So we need to figure out how much pay it will be based on the hours they worked times time and a half of their hourly wage. Since time and a half is a cell that is all on its own that will need to be used in all of our cells, we need to make this cell an absolute cell reference, which provides a permanent reference to a specific cell. The reason we use an absolute cell reference is because when you copy a formula containing an absolute cell reference, the cell reference in the copied formula does not change regardless of where you copy the formula. An absolute cell reference appears with a $sign before both the column letter and row number. In this formula, we first need to figure out how many hours of overtime the individual employee worked. So by clicking on our equal sign, and we're going to be using the orders of operation for this formula. So open bracket, our hours of worked minus the 40-hour work week, close bracket. And then we need to multiply that, which is our star, by our hourly wage times our time and a half. Now, as I've mentioned, time and a half, which is down in B21, will be used throughout the formula. So we need to make this absolute. The easiest way to make this absolute is to press F4. Not F4 on your keyboard as far as the letter F and the number 4. F4, which is a function key at the very top row of your keyboard. By clicking on F4, you'll notice that the $signs are automatically inputted. We can close the formula and hit enter. And we'll notice that the overtime pay for Abram is $119.40. And again, now that we have a formula inputted, we can use the autofill handle by clicking and dragging to the bottom. Now we need to figure out our gross pay. Our gross pay is what we make before our deductions, which is our regular pay plus our overtime pay. So it's a very simple formula by clicking on equal, clicking on our E5 plus our F5 and enter. So we now have a gross pay for Abrams of $517.40. Again, we can click on our fill handle and drag down. Now we have to calculate our deductions. The first deduction that gets deducted from a Canadian paycheck is income tax. You'll notice that in B22 there is an income tax rate of 15%. All income tax and all deductions are based on the gross pay. So by clicking on equal, clicking on our gross pay in G5, multiplying it by our deduction of income tax rate in B22. And again, this is an absolute value, so by clicking on F4 and hitting enter. So we get the income tax that will be deducted. And again, we would do the autofill. Now a quicker way to use the autofill is to double click. We can click and drag, which I have been doing, or we can double click on the black dot. Now be careful that the bottom row here does not get added because these are our totals which will be added later. So just delete if that occurs. Our employment insurance works the same way. So equal our gross pay, which is in G5, times our insurance rate, which is in B23, making it absolute because it is what we're going to use throughout the entire formula, and we click on enter. And again, if it makes it easier, we can just click and drag our fill handle. Same applies for the CPP, gross pay times our CPP rate, making it F4, and clicking on enter. And again, dragging down. Our benefit deductions, so some companies will offer benefits, and it depends on how many dependents you have in your family. Dependents are children or people that depend on you for the income that you bring home. So if you'll notice that in B25, you have to deduct per dependent. So we will do equal, choose our number of dependents, times the amount per dependent, make that absolute yet again, click on enter, and drag down. Our net pay is the pay that we take home. So it is our gross pay minus all of our deductions. So there's many ways that you can do this formula. You can do gross pay minus income tax, minus employment insurance, minus CPP, minus deduction, and get a net pay. That formula is fine as well. You can also use brackets, so you can use orders of operation. It really depends on how you would prefer your calculations to work. I like it very simple by clicking on equal, clicking on gross pay, minus my income tax, minus my employment insurance, minus my CPP, and minus my deduction. By clicking on enter, I now get a net pay of $337.57. And again, I can drag this down so it makes it easier to calculate all my employees within my worksheet. Up to this point, you have learned for how to insert in formulas into the Excel worksheet. However, Excel has many different ways of calculating things a lot easier than trying to figure it out for yourself. These are called functions. Functions are predefined computation that simplifies creating a complex calculation by using dialog boxes and screen tips to prompt you through selecting the values for the formula. Excel contains more than 325 functions, which are organized into categories. For this class, you're only going to learn 14 of them. When using functions, you must adhere to correct syntax. Syntax are rules that govern the structure and components for properly entering a function. The basic syntax of a function requires a function to start with an equal sign, to contain the function name, and to specify its argument. The function name describes the purpose of the function. For example, the function name sum, S-U-M, indicates that the function sums or adds the value. An argument is the input, such as the cell reference or value, needed to complete a function. There are some functions, in some cases, where a function will require multiple arguments separated by commas. We will learn more about these next week. Now, there are various ways to insert a function. Let's talk about the sum function. If we were to click on C17, you'll notice that in A17 the word totals. So we are going to total up our bottom row. In the Formula tab, we have Insert Function, so we can insert and type in what we're looking for. We can use the auto sum, which automatically does an auto sum for us. Or we can look within our ribbon drop-down dialog boxes. The easiest way to insert the basic functions that we're going to learn in this unit is to use the auto sum feature. It is also located on your Home tab in the far right-hand corner called Auto Sum. When you drop down the arrow, you'll see the word Sum. When you click on it, you'll notice that Excel automatically highlights all the cells in the above of the cell that contain numbers, and it's asking you, is this what you want to sum? If it is the numbers that you want to add, just click enter and the total automatically appears. If you don't like using the mouse, you can also type by clicking equal, start typing sum, inserting your open bracket, highlighting the numbers, and pressing enter. And again, once you have your formula and/or function inputted, you can use the autofill. So just like the autofill can be dragged down, you can also drag it across. It must be noted that you should not use a function for basic mathematical expressions. For example, if you're going to use a basic mathematical function of division, you do not need to insert the sum function to advise that you want to divide one cell by another. Let's move on to some basic statistical functions. Excel includes commonly used statistical functions that you can use to calculate how much you spend. Excel includes commonly used statistical functions that can help you calculate different functions. The first statistical function to talk about is the average function. The average function calculates the arithmetic mean of averages of values in a range. So if we click on G22, it will tell you that you want the average of the number of hours. So we can click up on the auto sum option and we can choose average. Now you'll notice that it's highlighting cells, but these are the cells that we do not want. So we can reselect the cells and we want the hours worked. So we just need to highlight and enter. The average of the gross pay, again, clicking on the arrow, average, highlighting our gross pay, enter. Net pay, clicking on average, selecting our net pay. Make sure you don't include the totals, and enter. Another statistical function is the median. The median function identifies the midpoint value in a set of values. In this case, the median option is not located in our drop-down function. So either A, we can click on more functions and type in median, and enter in our numbers, or the easiest way that I prefer to do median is to type it in. So equal median, left bracket, number of hours, enter. Equal median, left bracket, gross pay, enter. Equal median, open bracket, our net pay, enter. Another function is to identify the low and high values, which are min and max. The min function displays the lowest value in a range, and the max function identifies the highest value in a range. So our highest value, if we click on our arrow, and that is located in our quick access drop-down box, clicking on max, choosing the hours worked, and enter. And if we do our lowest, clicking on min, clicking on our hours worked, enter. And the same thing applies for gross pay. Clicking on max, choosing gross pay, enter. And the same thing for our lowest, gross pay, and enter. And then for our net pay, highest, net pay, enter, lowest, net pay, enter. And another function that you saw as you drop down this list is the count function. Now it is very important to realize that the drop-down count is count numbers, meaning if you want to count text, it's a slightly different formula. So let's do the gross pay first. So we're going to count how many gross pays that there are. So count number, gross pay, enter. So there's 12 employees. Same with net pay. Count numbers, selecting our net pay, enter. But if we do the same thing for number of employees, count number, same number of employees, we'll get a 0. And that's because employees is text, not number. So if we go back to our active cell, so making G21 our active cell, and up in our formula, if we edit our formula and we enter an A in front of the bracket and after the T, we call that a count A. And count A means it will count text. And by hitting enter, you'll notice now the 12 does appear. Excel also offers date functions. So for today's date in B3, we can do equal today, left bracket, right bracket. So no cells or no argument is required, and by clicking enter, we get today's date. If we wanted the computer date and time, it would be equal now, left bracket, right bracket, and it gives us the date and the computer time. And if we wanted the year, we can do equal year, left bracket, choosing the cell, right bracket, and it will display the year of that cell. Now when you enter a formula, Excel shows the results of the formula in the cell as you have seen up until now. However, you might want to display the formula instead of the calculated results in the cell. You already know that you can see the formula in the formula bar. However, what happens if you want to see the formula inside your worksheet? The quickest way to display cell formulas is to press the Control and the grave accent key, which is located to the left of the 1. So by clicking Control and the accent key, you'll notice that your formulas are displayed. It is a toggle option, so by doing this again, it reverts back to your results. Another way to display formulas is under the Formula tab. You can click Show Formulas. And again, by clicking it again, it reverts back. So as we mentioned in the Word program, this is called a toggle option. Toggle on and toggle off. And before we submit our worksheet to be completed, we must make sure that the number formatting and the color formatting is appropriate. As you learned in the previous unit, you must apply the 10% pretty before completion. So in this case, let's highlight all our dollar wages by selecting our first group of cells, holding our Control key, and selecting the remainder. And then clicking on our format number and choosing currency. We can also select our totals at the bottom and make them center. Down in our bottom left, we can select our 3 rates and make them percents. Selecting our table and making it currency. We can even add bold to our subheadings. And remember to use the Format Painter. Which makes your formatting a lot easier. Now that we have a professional worksheet that is now completed, we can now submit it to the people that need to be submitted. This concludes our virtual classroom for this unit. Please make sure to complete the required exercises.